New polling from Redbridge Group has revealed a steady increase in support for nuclear. Though this support does vary, it depends on how old you are and where you live. Is it because voters are coming around to the idea of a nuclear-powered future, or is it because of a lack of viable alternatives being put forward by the government? So where do renewables sit in all of this? We've got more analysis now. I'm joined by Redbridge Group Director Simon Welsh. Simon, thanks so much for your time as always. First of all, take us through all of the numbers here, and then I'll have a few questions about what it all means.
Yeah, no problem, Laura. So what we're seeing is, nuclear, which if you roll back the clock sort of 6 months ago was very much a bit of a dog, really, to be honest, in the polling. It did not poll well. We've steadily watched that support grow over these past few months. And what we're seeing in this latest poll is overall, an almost sort of fairly even kind of contest. And no surprising, as you can see on your screen there, the blue line indicating support, the red line indicating opposition. The further away you are from these proposed sites, the stronger the support is, although still contested, and we'll come back and we'll unpick a bit of this as we work through some of the other numbers. But clearly those areas close to the nuclear power sites that have been proposed, the opposition sort of significantly outnumbers the support. So that's the first sort of, while there's a headline of good news for the opposition, it's getting stronger, there's still this issue about proximity, and those communities in which it's been proposed are going to be a particular challenge for the opposition in the next election. It's interesting to then sort of unpick that a little bit more, and when we start to look at sort of the overall support and break it down by party affiliation. I shouldn't say affiliation, that's wrong, but party identification. So we ask people, who would you be voting for at the next election? And what you see is it breaks very much along party lines. So is there capacity for this to strip votes off Labor? Yeah, certainly, but there's certainly some strong support. And what you see in your graphs here is blue equals support, red equals opposition, dark blue is strong support, dark red is strong opposition. Look, there is some support amongst Labor voters. Are they likely to tip over to Liberals on this? We'll talk about this in a moment. I don't think this issue in itself is a vote swinger away from Labor, but I think there is a broader context in which this sits that is problematic for the government. I'll come back to that in a second. But as you can see here, very much breaking along party lines is kind of the headline there. There's also sort of differences that we see, although milder, sort of differences around location. So this is whether you're metro or whether you're regional, and we do see sort of a stronger support in regional, although that seems to be a little bit just because of the less uncertainty in the regions. People have sort of made their mind up a little bit more, and that's sort of playing into that. And we also see differences around age, and the differences around age are interesting in that what we see there is an interesting dip in support, particularly around sort of what I sort of call family-aged voters. So that's those sort of the 30s, 40s sort of voters. I think that's an interesting story, and certainly sort of aligned with what we're seeing in the groups, which is where folk are, where they had the big hesitation around it is safety, impact on future generations, and those sorts of things. So you would expect, people with young families to sort of have a bit of a dip of support in there, and we see that in this quantitative polling as well. But the really interesting one is the age schism. I can't remember last time I saw such a difference on age, and you can see in that graph there at the bottom of your screens, it's sort of a 40-point spread in terms of support versus opposition being weaker amongst women. Women really sort of rejecting this idea, but men really getting behind it. That is a fascinating thing. We talk about it in groups, and what we often see is that men feel that the safety, environmental sort of impacts of it all can be better managed, are more likely to think it can be managed than women. And I think that's sort of really playing into what we're seeing here. But I think the really important bit of this is not so much the issue in itself, but as I say, sort of this context in which it sits. And what's been happening is this growing sort of overall support for it, but as we've seen, it's complicated, is really coming not so much because what people are saying to us in the focus groups is not so much because they're coming around to thinking it's a brilliant idea, as you sort of alluded to in the thing. It's more so that other reason, which is, well, what's the alternative? If not nuclear, then what? And so this is really interesting, and it's indicative of a broader thing that's going on. So there's a few issues like this. Even the super for housing proposal, which 6 months ago, similarly, when we tested it, was with a bit of a dog. Even that's sort of starting to grow, and it's growing because there's really nothing coming from government that the people are seeing to sort of act as an alternative or a counterpoint to this. So people are sort of saying, well, if not that, then what? And I think this is the really deep problem for the Albanese government is it's the opposition that's really got control of the policy narrative at the moment. And this is really weird. This is rare. Usually at sort of this point of the election cycle, we're doing focus groups. We're having to remind people who the opposition leader is, let alone what their policies are. So I think there's a really sort of deep problem here for the Albanese government. They've sort of lost control of the policy agenda.
Wow. Okay. So is part of this, and I think we've started to see a steady stream of data, and we had it from AEMO last week about wind not doing what it needed to do. So gas was doing all the heavy lifting, and therefore, we're all paying more for electricity. Are people waking up to the idea that renewables cannot do it all? And look, I don't buy into this line that the opposition uses as well, that it's 100% renewables. The Labor government is trying to do that, putting all their eggs in one basket. In many ways, they only want to talk about renewables, though. They don't want to talk about that 10 to 20% of firming power that is going to be required, whether that be green hydrogen, whether that be nuclear, whether that be gas or coal.
Yeah. People like renewables. I mean, in the focus group, people would rather have renewables. And I think that's probably what the government's responding to.
But it's the idea and the reality, right?
Exactly. And that's sort of over the last 12 months, we've watched the voters really tune in to that gap. And so what they're saying is, we would rather have renewables, but we just don't see anything happening. We don't see the kind of capacity coming online that gives us confidence that we're anywhere near it. The classic line we keep hearing in focus groups is governments are great at talking about targets, but they're not great about actually getting it done.
Right. So Simon, do people still believe, because we're often told that renewables are the cheapest form of energy? Yeah, they will be eventually, but they're not now. So are people still believing that line, or are they a little bit more sceptical?
Yeah, they're a bit sceptical, but they're sceptical on both fronts, whether it's nuclear or renewables, and they're sceptical for the same reasons on both fronts. One is, yes, we see that there'll be this sort of big upfront kind of capital cost to get it all done, and who's going to pay for that? Well, it always ends up being us, so it won't be any different this time round. But then also the idea that, well, power prices, these corporates, and this comes back to the anti-corporate sentiment that you and I have discussed many times. These corporates that control the power prices, the prices aren't coming down. The prices only ever go up. We don't actually expect that either of them are going to deliver, end of the day savings to us, because we think the whole sort of the way the market works, the privatisation is going to sort of keep the prices going up anyway. So whether it's renewables or nuclear, there's absolute scepticism around cheaper as a concept.
Simon, always fascinating to talk to you, especially today. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Laura.